Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in on this workshop today. I just want to say data governance is a fairly new concept coming in the 2010s era from the different challenges that we've seen from the whole slew of data growing at an exponential rate inside the world. Um, and I started my career working in Tallahassee with a nonprofit, building out some data collection methods, KPIs. And as I transitioned into my career as a engineer, I really started to hone in on what are the things that are being done to make sure that the data that we collect is fair. Um, I have a particular interest in machine learning. So when I look at the outcomes of algorithms, I think about what's happening with the data that is being put into those algorithms, and that's what led me to data governance. And I am very excited to share the information that I have with you. So I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing. So this presentation is to boost your value with data governance. So I'm going to talk about some definitions for data governance and data management, the difference between the two. Then I'm going to go through what are the components of data governance, some of the benefits and challenges that are faced, particularly in smaller business, nonprofit type areas. And then I'm going to give a framework of um, maturity levels, how to set up a, a data governance process, and the different strategy alignment that is really required across the organization, the different roles and responsibilities that are needed in order to make um, a more cohesive and transparent working when it comes to your data. Okay, let's see. And we are seeing the presentation, right? Justin?
Yes, I was shaking my head, yes, but you couldn't see
Okay.
it.
Yeah, I can see. Okay, cool. So let's start with the definitions. So these two definitions I picked up from IBM because they really give a close to plain language um, defining of management versus governance. So data management is the practice of ingesting, processing, securing, and storing an organization's data where it is then utilized for just strategic decision making to improve business outcomes. Data governance is promoting the availability and quality, security of data through the different policies and standards that is put in place through strategic planning. And those processes determine who are our data owners, what are the data security measures, what are the compliance rules that need to be followed, what are the business rules that we're interested in, and so on and so forth. It's really a um, way of saying this is going to be our policy when it comes to our data. And then the management is the implementation, which I'm gonna display here. So in a little bit more detail, management is more of the day-to-day operations and governance is leading. Um, where management focus on the small details, um, as in what are departmental, the siloed processes across the organization, um, or what are the individual outcomes from a specific project, and how do we manage from point A to point B when it comes to collecting the data to storing it somewhere or making some type of modeling with it. Governance really focuses on what is the organizational health and structure that we have that is consistent across all of our different areas that we work. And the questions that we kind of get is, um how do we access the viability of our programming? How is the data showing that our program is really doing the things that we put ourselves out to do? How are we attaching it to our mission? And also, who has access to see, the modeling that we're doing? Who has access to the insights for specific measures? Um, okay. And I want to say right here, I'm gonna mention it later, but the three main points of governance would be accountability, standardization, and transparency. So accountability being the who's responsible for what, standardization meaning data standardization. So what are the codes that we're using across our organization to map the same data points to a single particular KPI or key performance indicator. And then transparency is how are we getting all this information shared to all of our stakeholders and across the organization. So this is a nice diagram that tells us about the components of data governance. And I always like to tell people that it starts with the people. It's everybody's responsibility. I often have conversations with different people in my organization about, you know, um, you might think that one person or one department is responsible for one thing, which is true. However, when it comes to data governance, we have to have a policy and standards, processes, uh, the socialization, the culture across everybody in the organization to really understand what's going on with the data. And that those things by having that culture helps us to maintain a standard and have better security, be able to communicate certain points and reports and metrics, and also be able to see, what are our gaps without really understanding the data. A lot of times people can't talk to what are the gaps that we are facing, and that having data governance as part of the culture across the whole organization will really help to have people articulate, what are the things that they're needing, what are they missing out on, and better understand the metrics that are being put out. So here's some benefits when it comes to data governance. So it helps the organization become more stable. We have reduced risk when it comes to data security because we have a policy in place to know who are the right contacts and even have some mitigation uh, policies for how to avoid failures in the future. Preserving the strength of stakeholder confidence. So if we have grants that are funding our program and they have certain specific requirements when it comes to measurements and our and what we are showing and reporting on when it comes to our program, then by having this data policy, having some governance is understood across the organization exactly how to the structure of the organization and under the understanding from the end user all the way up to the executive director will show a great sign of strength and cohesionness when it comes to stakeholders looking at your program. As I mentioned before, visibility of errors and transparency, enhancing data trust. So that talks about being able to trust the data that you are receiving. So, and what I mean by that is like maybe how are you sure that when a data analyst gives you a insight or a visualization that the information that's being presented is accurate to what's actually going on to with your program. And then another point is accountability. So defining who, like I said before, who are the people that are responsible for certain aspects of the governance structure. So I'm going to walk through the challenges one by one, and I'm saying I feel like I'm going a bit fast. So if I will have questions at the end, I'll try to leave. I built it so that there could be questions at the end. So just want to put that note in there. All right. So the challenges when it comes to implementing a data governance structure. The first one is poor data standardization. Those are things such as if you were collecting information on location and one of your programs, if you're a national program, your program in Idaho is putting the whole state name, while the one here in Florida is only doing abbreviations, right? So if it's the same organization, there should be a standard on how data is entered and collected into your system to help prevent duplications and erroneous data points that are already accounted for on another part of the report. So there's misalignment in systems and processes. So there could be the issue where the process on one division is not the same process in another division, and they're doing the exact same thing. That causes poor data standardization as well, and it also causes a misunderstanding in communication lines when it comes to reports and being able to really firm up the the trust of what you're actually seeing across the organization in that way. Lack of self-sufficiency. So another way to put this is lack of training, lack of education when it comes to the data policies and the standards that you hold. There's lack of controls, uh, also a lack of policies and organizational standards. And a lot of times we're in a place where we don't necessarily have those because they weren't needed. However, in my example of getting a major grant and from a government entity, for instance, they usually typically will have a specific standard in place for data security and your reports on what you're reporting on. So having a lack of controls for your data could cause issues in that regard. There's regulatory and security requirements, and then the largest one would be change management. So that is managing the change across the whole organization of the new policies and the new processes and workflows that you intend to put in place. It takes a lot of planning and just everybody's human beings. So there could be some contentions with some contentions with the new hierarchies when it comes to roles and responsibilities. There could be, like I said, the lack of training and education, and maybe somebody just feels like they shouldn't be changing what they've been doing for the last 3 to 5 years or even 10 years because it's worked fine. So those are things to be aware of, especially when you're talking about implementing data governance, because it's like I said, it starts with all the people buying in and understanding where the movement is going. All right, so I wanted to show this maturity model. This model is done by IBM as well. There's many other maturity models out there that you can look if you just search in data governance maturity models. And it talks about how mature your governing structure and your organization's data regulation and understanding um is. What level is it at, right? So it starts from at level 1 where they're typically for startups, it's a thing where there's little or any no awareness of the importance of data. Like maybe you're just doing this just for a little extra cash. You're doing it as a heart thing, you're giving a charitable donation of your time, volunteering, um, and not really caring of tracking the activities because it's not an ideal for you to track it. So there's no need to set standards in managing the data. So that's where everybody typically starts when it comes to data governance and building an organization. Um, then level 2 is where we call managed, where it's the importance of data is beginning to be understood and realized across the organization. However, a managed um level is typically um where there isn't really a real buy-in across the organization. It's just, people get that we should start taking some sign-in sheets and really paying attention to start trying to pay attention to what is going on with our program and what we're doing. Now, a defined level right after that is where data regulation and management guidelines are defined. So you're putting together a policy for different people to follow across your organization. However, that this defined level is missing a cohesion across the organization. What I mean by that is maybe you make definitions for your food bake project, and then maybe you make a separate set of defining materials for your housing and sheltering initiative, and then maybe there's another program somewhere else across the country that is creating their own definitions of what's going on. So level 3 and level 2 are some areas where the data is really siloed, and then there isn't a organizational wide standardization and transparency into transparency for somebody sitting at like your board of directors or executive directors to see what's going on. So level 4 is where it helps some of that. So there is a measurable, um, quantifiable goals for each of those projects that can then be tracked on an individual basis. And then there's data processes, and there's some risk mitigation that is being put in place at each of those programs. And then finally, level 5 is an optimized level where those quantified measures, those KPIs that were made across the organization from program to program are brought together at the higher level, at the executive level, and then disseminated back down across the entire organization, so that everybody has the same standard, the same process, and uh, accountability, transparency across the whole organization in a very defined and acceptable measure. Um, yeah. enterprise wide. That's the key. That the transparency can be enterprise wide, and somebody from Colorado can come to Florida and be looking at the same report and understand exactly what's going on. All right. So in this slide, I'm going to talk about the strategic alignments. Typically, there are two domains when it comes to data. There's a business data domain with business intelligence, and then there's the information technology domain when it talks about applications and storing. And I'm gonna walk through both of the domains and how they relate to one another in order to get data governance implemented properly within your organization. Starting with the technology side. So the technology domain really looks at things when it about data quality. For instance, like I said, about the state example for how are we standardizing our data across the organization. Workflow management. So what is the workflow from the collection of the data, the processing of the data, storage of the data, and then how are we getting our insights, the analytics capabilities that we have, the modeling that we are going to provide, the tool expertise. So are you proficient with whatever tool is being used to store your data, to track your data, to model your data, give visualizations, whether it's Excel, Power BI, Wild Apricot, or any other of the CRM tools, Salesforce, that are out there. And then we also work to migrate data from one system or another. So we understanding the two different systems and what would be the best way if we needed to move all of our data from one system to the next, then what is that process? What's the best time to keep our data quality inside of that flow? That's all on the IT side. On the business side, the business domain talks about, okay, what is going to be the data strategy and the business rules, the policy, who's going to own the data. Let me not say it that way. The business side are the owners of the data because they're the ones that have to directly report to stakeholders any of the metrics that are being collected. So they hold the data ownership, they hold the data standards, the security. And when I talk to security standards and business rules, that typically comes from external factors, right? So we have like the HIPAA, the SOP compliance, the compliance that you need for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the state guidance, the state statutes when it comes to providing your services. Those are all business rules that need to be understood for an effective data policy and data strategy on the business side. The business domain is also worries about what's the best way to acquire the data, right? So working the working in a housing program, you wouldn't collect the same type of data and probably want to go about doing the same type of surveying and collection as you would doing a food bank, right? So you really understanding what the business is or the organization is doing in that specific for that specific audience. And then lastly is the roles and the stewardship. So what are the roles that go into those environments in order to make sure that we're collecting the data correctly, that we're following policies and are in compliance um with how we manage the data. So this is the cyclical cycle of data governance. The business domain identifies the requirements, priorities, and they refine and improve the decisions that is made when it comes to the data strategy, while the IT and technology domain informs the capabilities, the trade-offs, and constraints that your organization will have when it comes to trying to implement the policy. So it's a real, it's not, I don't want to call it a push and pull, but it is a iterative process where um the business says, okay, we need to do these specific things, and then on a technology domain says, okay, well, our current process does not allow us to have that level of security. We might need to look at something else. And then the business goes back and says, okay, well, these are the other tools that are available. Does this give you does this give us the capability? And it just keeps going back and forth until you really have a solid strategy and policy in place. Yeah, it's a really fun process. I've worked with a couple of people on this process, and still it really helps to find that clarity for business owners and even IT technology people like myself about what is best for the organization when it comes to data governance. And I'm just stressing here again that it starts typically with external factors when it comes to the business strategy, and then we go through the cyclical push and pull until we get a good implementation coming back out with a relevant data governance structure. All right, looks like I'm doing very good on time. So I'm going to talk about this part right here. So setting a meaningful data governance structure. So the first thing to do, like I said, kind of going in line with the previous slide, is starting with the business strategy and asking the right questions to determine the scope. And this can be done at the large grand scale organizational level, but this is also done at the programmatic level. So for each program, what is the scope of the data that you're looking at? Are the things that you are doing to collect that data, and what type of insights can you gather from that data? That's step number two, identifying the objectives and key performance indicators for that program. And the scope and understanding your audience really helps you to see, okay, so from this specific program in this location, this is what we're really targeting. And this is the data that we have, and really trying to understand if that data maps to that target. Once you identify and get those things, then the next step would be to create and propose an approach to stewardship. And I'm gonna speak about the roles in the next slide, but when I say stewardship, I'm referring to, okay, who are going to be our boots on the ground workers to make sure that we are keeping up with this data initiative that we are starting? Who are going to be the ones that are spearheading and championing our data policy? The fourth would be documenting standard procedures, policies, and control mechanisms. So once you have those roles and responsibilities set up, it's time to finalize documentation. All of this should be documented, by the way. but step four, once you have steps 1 through 3, then you can really start putting together a full documentation of what your new data governance standard and policy would be. And then you educate your staff, your stakeholders, the grant writers, the funders, the donors on on all the policies and the new policies and new responsibilities when it comes to your data strategy. And then you iterate as needed, right? So you redevelop and revise the policy as needed. Say that your capacity with your system that you created before has now been outgrown from the growth that you're experiencing by understanding the value of what's actually going on in that specific program. Then you just go back to your documentation, find out what are those gaps that you can see now. Talk to your data stewards, talk to your grant providers, and really understand what are the issues, and then you charter a new program, a new revision to take place. And then but the thing about doing that, by doing it this way, is that when you recharter a new work, typically you don't have to change the objectives. You don't have to change the scope. You might have to grow the scope, but when I mean like the data that you're looking at, you typically won't have to change it if you go through this process correctly. When you're rechartering and revising the policy. All right. So let's talk about roles and responsibilities. And I want to preface this first by saying that when it comes to data governance, the roles and responsibilities that I am about to list are not specific job titles. Um they are roles and they're, I hate using the same word, I'm sorry, but there's there are responsibilities that are taking on by those that are currently already staffed. And it is just another line item that is becoming part of that job role, right? So if it is your program administrator, I'll talk to that when I go through the next slide. But let's get the definitions of the roles and responsibilities here. So first will be the governance sponsor. A governance sponsor is just the individual, a fancy way of saying an individual that supports the activities of the organization-wide governance. So somebody typically at the executive level that's able to see from their viewpoint what's going on at all the different programs, and really advocating and supporting and being a liaison to the stakeholders and uh, donors and funders for what's going on when it comes to data in your organization. Then there is the data steward, who is an individual or a team of individuals responsible for uh, carrying on and championing the data governance right there at the end user. So if it's your clients or participants, whoever is the most customer facing people, they are the ones that are considered data stewards, because it is up to them to collect the data and monitor the collection of the data, and really be the first hands of ingestion when it comes to data governance. Um, and then I talk about here, there's two different types. There's the business type and the technical type. So the business ones are there to own the definitions and business elements, really understanding the audience, as I explained in the framework a couple slides ago, really understanding the scope and the audience of what's happening in that program at that moment, and how to properly collect the data, the compliance that is needed right there front of the ground. And then there's the technical stewards who own the data systems and the modeling. So these and technical stewards don't necessarily even have to be like employed by your nonprofit or a staff member of the nonprofit. A lot of more advanced tools actually offers a personal, like, account manager that is there to learn your program and build out your data systems and modeling if you get an advanced tool that offers that type of support. So those type of account managers and technical expertise, they understand the system, they understand what is the capabilities of the systems, and they will be considered your technical stewards if there is nobody on staff that has that real technical expertise. Then we have the data owners, right? So this is kind of like a middle personnel who are the ones that manage the data stewards. Maybe it's your program administrator, like I explained before, that and they're responsible for resolving data challenges within their domain, reviewing the concerns of data stewards and those ones that are um right there on the ground. They're the ones that's making the decisions on how to manage the data, what changes need to be implemented if there is a failure happening on they are they're the ones that should be first to know and have some key learnings and mitigation tasks to take in order to resolve the issue front hand. Then the IT systems administrator is kind of the same thing, except for on the IT side. And these are the people that are managing the aspects of the data management tools and the storage mechanisms. So they are understanding what are the full capabilities of the management tool. So basically a technical steward, but if you had it's a hierarchical thing. If you had more people on the ground and then somebody else, then that would be your IT administrator. And then there's the external factors, the compliance officers, the stakeholders that are advising the data stewards and the data owners about what are the requirements, such as privacy or disclosure. That could be a staff person, but also could be um, the the compliance or regulatory officers if you are being funded through a organization that has regulatory requirements. Then these are the persons that you would talk to really understand what are the measures that need to be taken with your data to make sure that you're in compliance. All right. So here is another chart. So I just built out a, a generic diagram of what a nonprofit organization may look like. Starting with our board of directors, the executive director, then we have our program administrators, the financial officers, the administrative offices, and then we have all the different programs that can fall under the program administrator. Um, and then there's also, not to say that there's not programs underneath the administrative offices and the financial officer, but this is just purely for example. So referencing the framework, we have business strategy coming down from the board of directors, your stakeholders, and your executive directors down into the organization, into the different programs. That's where it always starts. It has to start with business strategies and understanding the rules and policies that govern the activities that you are taking in your organization. That is why compliance officers fall within the stakeholder and direct the board of directors. You are being advised by your board of directors and your other external sources of support about what are the regulatory issues that you are being faced with, and they should offer, what are the corrections to that, to whatever the issues are. The governance sponsor would be somebody like the executive director, or it doesn't have to be the executive director, but it's just somebody that sits high enough to have direct communications with your stakeholders and all of the data owners to show the to really be able to be the liaison and communicate the barriers that are being seen when it comes to running the program and reporting on the program, and then advocating to find more support, to maybe charter a new working group in order to really get to the root of the issues and support the data owners in their time, in their capacity for really running their programs. And then underneath the data owners are the data stewards. So there will be the people that are facing the end of if not the executive end, then the user customer participant end of your programs, and really being the ones that see what is actually happening in the program and being able to report that to the data owners, to then move back up. And that's where this line comes in. So this is where the data stream and reporting happens. It happens from the bottom back up to the executive director. And I'm sorry, I went to brain fart for a minute. Oh yes, and they are the ones that where the reporting starts. So the reporting starts with the data acquisition. Then those programs give all of their reports, and the program administrator and the data owners have to compile the reports across their organizations to give to the executive level about what's happening. And if the data stewards are really are pay close attention to what's actually happening, then they're able to, and there's communication lines that are set in place and the policy and the standard when it comes to communicating the data and the issues with the data, then the data owners can understand and communicate that straight back to your governance sponsor, so that there is clarity and transparency from the bottom all the way back up. However, so that's what that's what the major benefit of governance has over management, because like I said, the management is just the day-to-day. If it's not understood by the data stewards that they have a place, then maybe they don't think that the issues and the gaps that are existent are as bad as they are. And that also comes with that, what I mentioned about the lack of education, is just if you have no standards in place, then they wouldn't be able to know how to identify those gaps. So that's why governance is so much more important. And I am complete, it looks like. That is my presentation. That is how you implement data governance. That's what the framework looks like. And I am open to questions. I did a lot better on time than I thought I would.
I have a question.
Yes.
Will we have access to your slide deck? I tried to furiously scribble most of it, but I missed a few bits and pieces.
That's Justin.
I will say the presentation is already going to be available via our YouTube channel. So we record all of our presentations, so we'll put it out there so you can always have a playback of it. And it'll be up probably as soon as first thing tomorrow morning. So you should be able to see it by first thing tomorrow morning.
Great, thank you.
Awesome.
Justin, where did you say it's available?
On our YouTube channel. So we typically post all of our trainings and workshops on YouTube, as well as our social media page on Facebook. So you'll see a post probably first thing tomorrow morning, just saying, hey, if you missed yesterday's training, we have a playback available here via our YouTube channel. So you can either go to YouTube and search up United Partners for Human Services, or wait for the post to come out tomorrow morning on our Facebook page at United Partners for Human Services as well.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
So I work for a nonprofit and I kind of have no idea what to take data on. What are some examples, maybe like businesses or other nonprofits, of what they take data on? Because
Yeah.
we do mental health, support groups and classes and stuff, and it's very soft data that we collect. Like, how did you feel when you came in? How do you feel when you go out? So it's a little hazy to me, I think.
Okay. I like that you use the word soft data. Because uh I would like to change that perspective. The data, that type of data, how somebody feels, and this is when it comes to social sciences, there's a lot of qualitative data that is difficult to quantify. However, there are tools and assessments that are available that speak to feelings and those qualitative aspects of what you experience in those type of settings. And a lot of times I know that I've seen where their organizations actually are their mission is just to have the workshops, right? Just to give the trainings. And that's providing access to a resource that might not be available to your participants, that and major that's a major find for some organizations that like to support those type of things. So I don't want you to feel like the data that you collect is, I guess, not worthy of being collected or being reported on, because there are funders and donors and stakeholders that are looking for an organization to do exactly what you're doing, to provide a mental health support type role to populations that might not have it. So it's really about that maturity level thing. Like I said, you might not see it as a major point, like you say, soft data, what people don't really need this, but there are people out there, and it's just about knowing and understanding the value that your work holds when it comes to the right audience.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Do we have any more questions? Alrighty, well, seeing none, I want to thank you all for definitely coming out to the Boost Your Value with Data Governance workshop this afternoon, or this morning, excuse me. I also want to thank Grant Steans with Steans Data Solutions for taking the time out of his morning and his busy day to provide us with such a wealth of resources and tips for all of us to be able to utilize within our organizations individually and then collectively as we continue to do the work here across Leon County and across our Big Bend area. Just a few things before I get you out of here. We will be having a workshop on Thursday, this upcoming Thursday. It's our Cybersecurity for Nonprofits workshop. It'll be presented by Frederick Smith. He used to be the IT director for the city of Tallahassee, now lives up in the North Carolina area. Him and his wife have started a business by the name of I Did Creations, and they do a lot of work within the human services and nonprofit sector with helping out in terms of IT, cybersecurity, as we've seen a lot of things going on from a local, state, and national perspective in terms of cybersecurity in every facet. So please come out tomorrow, Thursday at 2 p.m. It'll be via Zoom as well. To that facilitation training as well. And then we'll also have our ARPA workshop with the ARPA team, and that's for current ARPA grantees only, with the city county team, in terms of just making sure that we're doing everything that we need to do to offer the resources possible for ARPA grantees to finish out that cycle, as it will be ending September 30th of this year. If there is no other questions or anything else here, we thank you for your time, and we cannot wait to see you again Thursday at 2 p.m. for that workshop, as well as next week at 10 a.m. For the ARPA workshop on Tuesday, March 28th. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your morning and day.